The sun had just peaked over the trees, slowly springing up to waken the birds, the squirrels, all living things. You could almost stare at it before it took over the sky with this overpowering brightness, shifting colors from bright pinks and oranges to light blue. It was going to be a fine Tuesday morning. In fact, it was a special day. Tommy and his sister, Abby, had made it to the kitchen table last, as usual. Before they woke, their parents had already had time to get ready for work and make breakfast. The kids had yet to say hello to their mom and pop, rubbing their eyes and sniffing up a storm. Mom had noticed. "What's the matter? Today's the big day. Tommy, I hope you slept well. I was afraid you'd never wake up. Dad thought it'd be funny to pour some water on your head." Tommy's eyes were puffed up and swollen. He didn't look well rested. "Couldn't sleep. Sorry, Ma. I'm just trying to wake up." "Well, get to it. Soon you'll know just as much as your father and I do. Everyone has to do it to become an adult. You'll understand why when it's over. You'll understand everything. For now, you have to get ready. It's a big deal. Eat up. Get dressed. This will all be over before you know it." He rolled his eyes. He honestly didn't care enough to understand it all, nor was he in a rush to see what the big transition was all about, like some of his friends were. If he had a time machine, he'd just live out his teenage years for the rest of eternity. But there he was, about to have his mind open and his eyes widened. Tommy didn't have any friends who'd been through it. All he had were rumors that were passed around from unknown sources. One claimed that the world had killed off itself about 1,000 years ago, and everything being taught in school was a lie in order to cover it up and prevent it from happening again. Another one, much more far-fetched, was that aliens seeded their genetics on Earth and that religion was invented to bring order and peace. In short, there was no God. Finally, and the one Tommy thought was most logical, was that it was simply a ceremony and lecture for those finally becoming an adult. Some sort of rite of passage where you dress all funny, say a few good words, get a quick little lecture about adulthood and what comes next in life, then move on. That was it, surely no big deal. He just hoped he'd get the day over with and move on. It was a federally mandated law that you couldn't divulge any information regarding the event or your experiences participating in it. If you got caught, rumor was you'd go missing and never see the light of day again. It was almost 8 a.m. Dad had already left for work while Mom stayed behind to care for Abby and Tommy. She had already picked out an outfit for Tommy and hung it on his door, being extra careful when ironing his button-up and khaki pants. His shoes were sitting next to the door, a fine pair of brown Aldos, which also must have been polished since they'd look shiny and new compared to how scuffed up they were before. The transition must be a big deal. Mom really wanted him to go in looking very well kept. He threw on the clothes, making note of the time Mom said he'd need to be in the car, not a second behind. Earlier if he was able, 8:30. He was a little behind, that fear in the back of his mind of what he might be walking into. Thoughts of the world on fire, aliens. He pressed both feet into the shoes and threw on a coat before heading to the car, just shy of 1 minute before takeoff. The drive seemed to grow longer and longer, along with the anticipation. Time moved slower, as if to prolong the inevitable widening of the eyes, as some called it. World destruction, aliens? It was hard to stop thinking about it. He felt a knot sink in his throat as Mom said they were pulling up. It was a movie theater, the same one he goes to almost every other weekend with his friends. Relief took over, the knot in his throat shrinking. This place was safe. He knew it well. Stepping out of the passenger side of his mom's minivan, he gave a wave goodbye, but Mom wasn't going to let him go without a bit of physical contact. She gave her a hug, emphasizing a good squeeze a little too long for Tommy's liking, then sent him on his way. Abby had already been dropped off at school, so he'd said his goodbyes then. No hugs. She was annoying and today wasn't that big of a deal anyway. A wave did the job. He'd made his way to the front steps of the theater where a long line serpentined from the front doors, several men in security outfits doing pat-downs. He got behind a tall guy who looked 7 foot tall with jet black hair and a crooked smile. His nickname, ironically, was Shorty. Tommy had introduced himself, asking about the weight and smirking from the nickname, Shorty giving one of his crooked smiles. They'd been discussing conspiracy before Tommy walked up, probably to pass time and make the line less of a drag. It was a good 50 yards from the entrance, so anything to make it go by faster was encouraged. Before they knew it, the line shrunk and they were at the front door. Security appeared extra thorough, being extra careful checking IDs, as to not let anyone under the age of 18 into the building. Lest be the end of the world or my life, Tommy thought. Him and a group of others were directed to stand in designated spots while they awaited their name to be called. The wait wasn't long before someone shouted his name. He'd been led to a room towards a corner of the building, not a theater like he thought, alone. In the room were no pieces of furniture or office equipment, except a chair. No paintings, no computers, no tables. Just a red metal chair like the ones at the DMV, mockingly uncomfortable. The door shut behind him before he could ask any questions. Nothing but his thoughts in that nasty chair. He sat. After a minute or so, a group of men in coats, along with security, entered the room. "Could you please state your name and date of birth?" one of them asked. "Tommy Farrell, September 3rd, 2059. "Good. Now, Mr. Farrell, I presume you'd like to know what the transition is all about, what it means?" Tommy nodded. "Precisely. We hope you don't mind the security. You'll soon understand. If I can be of any reassurance, they're for both of us, so don't mind them. This will be brief. We really don't like to waste time here. There's plenty of others behind you, so let's get started." Tommy had yet to speak, ever more curious, waiting. "Do you love your mother, Tommy?" "Yes." "Why?" Why ask? The question seemed irrelevant. Then several more followed. Questions about school, his friends, a girl he loved, life at home, etc. Tommy began to pry. What do these questions have to do with my transition? I don't understand. He crossed his arms, shutting himself off. What he was told next, no man could prepare for. In 2045, the US government, along with several other NATO allies, began a classified project that came to be known as Operation 45. The goal? To beat China and Russia at being the first to create artificial general intelligence. A computer as smart as a human. In 2058, we achieved it, but we wanted to go farther. Could we make the ultimate Turing test and possibly understand consciousness deeper than before? That's when we created the transition. From start to finish, it would be an 18-year-long project. Stop! Tommy shifted forward in his chair, but before he could speak, he was interrupted. "Tommy, we have more than enough time for questions. This will be over in just a moment. As I was saying, over the last 18 years, we've been collecting data, observing, so to speak, with an attempt to understand the deeper questions of philosophy, of science, of what it means to be. You ask what the questions from the beginning of our meeting have to do with your transition. Here is your answer. Your whole life, in short, has been fabricated. Your family, your school, from the stores you shop to the food you buy, all of it was crafted. You and every other young adult taking part in the transition have been living under extensive surveillance for the last 18 years. Tommy was uneasy and rose from the chair, security paying close attention. What are you saying? Our final piece of data to close out this 2-decade-long project has been completed. Your answers to our questions here today, from how much you looked up to your father, wanted to be just like him, to how you fell in love with the girl from your school, proved that we'd succeeded. Your mother, your father, your sister, even that girl you fell in love with, are all AGI, artificial general intelligences, and you never knew it. You die for them, you said. You loved them. And they were just abiotic organisms in high-tech saran wrap. They were all robots, Tommy. There was a commercial for a new movie coming to theaters across the US. The commercial was extremely vague and very atypical. There was no actual film of the movie, and all it showed was a narrator saying it was the opportunity of a lifetime. It was only going to play one time and no more, which my friends and I thought was super weird, but also really cool. We wanted to be the ones to go see it, so we immediately bought some tickets before they sold out, which we knew they would go very fast. We lucked out and got tickets to our local movie theater, though the ticket prices were extremely inflated, like $70 or something, and it was still going to be about a week before the showing of the movie. Between then, we all kind of played around with ideas of what the movie might be about. I thought it was probably a new concept of how movies were produced, seeing that COVID and online movie streaming put a huge dent in the pockets of theaters across the country. It made sense, but I still couldn't tell how they'd pull it off. I just figured it was the last hurrah attempt at reviving the big screen. My buddy Dale was super cynical with his idea, saying that it was probably the next MK Ultra, the latest CIA cover-up, where we just bought front row tickets to be lab rats and possibly end up on some little kid's milk carton at school. Yeah, Dale is one of those flat earther people, thinks fairies are real and that 9/11 was an inside job. He's got some good arguments, but some of the things he says just don't make any sense. Moving on. The theater was packed, very unusual. This place was always dead. It went from thriving to a litter box for vagrants and homeless after the pandemic. But that day was different. Everyone was there. People were flying in to see this movie. There were scalpers on the corner of the street across from the theater peddling tickets for $140. As we stood in line waiting to get in, we watched a few people fight over some of the last tickets those scalpers were holding. We overheard one guy saying he saw someone pay $300 for just a single ticket. That completely blew my mind. I thought $70 was steep. Couldn't imagine paying any more. The guy at the ticket stand was a little strange. I'd come here a lot and I couldn't recognize him. He was dressed like some guy from the FBI. Black uniform, earpiece, the whole shebang. No way this rundown place was dumping money into something like that. It just seemed off. Something else must have been going on. We got inside, grabbed some drinks and candy. I had to go with the Sour Patch Kids and a Coke. Never was much of a popcorn guy. The people at the concession stand were all wearing the same uniforms. It was like we walked into some government building, stacked with security and cameras watching our every move. We finally made our way to our room. We didn't get good seats. Like I said, these tickets went quick. We must have been pretty close to last when getting our tickets because the only options we had for seating were the worst, second row from front. When we sat down, it felt like when I was a kid, shoving my face right in front of the TV, Mom screaming at the top of her lungs to go sit on the couch before I permanently damaged my vision. It didn't take long for everyone to get seated and for the pre-movie trailers to roll. I'd sucked my drink down pretty quick and had to use the bathroom. I thought it was the perfect time to go use the restroom before the movie started. Number 2, if you were wondering. That might have been too much info. I was in there a lot longer than I wanted to be. While I was sitting in the stall, I overheard some yelling. I didn't think much of it, so I continued my business. I hoped I didn't miss anything while I was in there, so I moved pretty fast back to the theater room when I was done. When I got back, everyone was gone. I went up front to the concession stand and asked where everyone went. Showed them my ticket and they said there was no movie playing in there and that they didn't know what I was talking about. I'd gone back to the ticket stand and did the same thing, getting the same answer. I'd gone out to the parking lot and all the cars were gone. Where was everyone? They were gone. I haven't seen my friends to this day.